I wasn't planning to make it a series of a sort, but last week's story about the spooky lonely dairy farm reminded me that I have another haunting workplace-related story that I have translated quite some time ago. It's a bit too long to pair with other stories, so I thought why not make another episode out of it. A workplace again, but this time we are back in town, a bustling university district with a very active nightlife in Seoul called Sinchon, and a modern cafe bar there. Behind the gleaming facade of full-length windows was hidden a tragic past that continued haunting the place. Without further ado, let's read this allegedly true story about the haunted bar. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. Back in 2002, I worked part-time at a bar in Sinchon, popular district among youngsters for shopping and nightlife at the time. The three-story building the bar situated was a small commercial building with a restaurant on the ground, a cafe on the first, and a bar on the second floor. The whole first and second floor were cladded with floor-length windows. The owner, who also owned the cafe, hardly showed up, and the business was all run by the manager. On the rooftop was an extra space that was used as the storage. To keep the record of stocks in and out clean, it was up to the bartender to take out the supplies from the storage, and only he kept the key and the checklist. A few months into my work there, both bartenders quitted in a short span of time. I was reluctantly pushed to take over the job as a bartender, persuaded by the promise that it was going to be just temporary and I was going to be awarded for the extra work. Naturally, the job of managing the supply fell into my hand too. So for the first time after almost half a year working there, I went up to the storage. First thing I noticed was how dirty it was in the staircase up to the rooftop. It was an old building, but it felt like as if nobody ever cleaned there since the building first opened. One side wall of the stair was covered with translucent plastic sheets, which became practically opaque with accumulated dusts. The storage room itself seemed to have been once used as a flat, with its space divided into a room and a kitchenette. There was also a clothes hanger with some old clothes still hanging there. I wondered why they were still left there in that otherwise tight space with boxes and drinks and bottles. I kept then a friendly relationship with staffs of the cafe. It was a routine that we gathered up at the cafe to drink and chat after the closing to kill time till the first metro train of the day. So one day, 7 of us were making small talks as usual. Then came up a strange rumor that was floating around the staffs, that one of them heard somebody calling him in the empty cafe, or heard a customer coming in, but there was nobody when she came out with the menu, or at 3 a.m, well past the closing hour, heard somebody singing from the bar. As a matter of fact, it did happen to me once too. That I heard somebody calling me hello, to which I answered yes, only to realize there was nobody else in the bar. But I was more a skeptic about such things, and I just took them all mildly amusing. Nevertheless, not to break the flow of the chit-chat, I added, "You've never been to the storage on the top, have you? Somebody must have once lived there, and there are still old clothes hanging. Isn't it odd when the bar and cafe were opened at least a couple of years ago?" "Wow, that's odd. Whose clothes are they?" one of them asked. "No idea. The manager didn't say anything when I asked if I should throw them away," I said. Then the older assistant manager, who was staying away from our talk, came over and said, "Since you are talking about the odd here, well, the manager told me to keep my mouth shut. Should I tell you?" "What is it? Do tell us," we all chanted in unison. "You should promise not to spread a word of it," said he, and continued. According to him, the bartenders quit the job because they saw ghosts too many times. Before they left, they advised him that he too would be better off to quit soon before anything worse happened. Triggered by I and some other skeptic colleagues insisting they couldn't have been serious, the assistant manager called up the former bartender, let's call him Junyoung, on a speakerphone. "Hello, Junyoung. It's me. All fine?"
Yes. Been some time, hasn't it? Hope you are not still working for the cafe,"
said the bartender. "Well, exactly on that subject. I and other kids are now talking about strange things going on here. Did you really see ghosts at the bar?"
I don't want to talk about it,"
said the bartender and hung up. Now the mood got serious. Girls were getting agitated, and that the building was haunted became a proven fact already. I excused myself for toilet and called up Junyoung, the bartender, again to apologize. "Junyoung? I'm sorry about the earlier. The chit-chat got a bit too heated and ended up summoning you. It won't happen again," I said. After a few seconds of silence, Junyoung said,
"No, it's fine. I'm actually on my way home after work. I'll drop in there and tell you everything I know in first hand. Wait up."
Indeed, Junyoung came around, and after drinking up a glass full of water, opened his mouth, looking around us.
"I don't care whether you believe me or not. What you make of it is up to you,"
he said. One early morning, the cafe was all empty but a single client who was clearly killing time till the first metro. He ordered a glass of beer, so Junyoung went up to the bar to fetch a bottle. The bar was empty and the lights were out already. He had already been feeling spooky about the whole space, so he went straight to the fridge to fetch the beer and was heading down. But unwittingly, he noticed the floor-length front window, all fogged up, even though it wasn't cold or humid that day. Then he saw, on the tall bar stool, a strange man sitting with his head down. It was Junyoung's earnest expression above all else that gave me goosebumps. His terror recounting the story was all too real to be a white lie. And next day, he told the manager that he couldn't possibly work there anymore.
"Did the manager let you go so easily?"
one of us asked. "Well, he couldn't stop me. He saw ghosts before me and is preparing to quit himself," Junyoung said. "Really? But he said it was all but nonsense rumor and shushed me," the assistant manager said. I'm sure he's scared himself. I don't want to talk behind his back, but you should all know this too," Junyoung said. Apparently one day when Junyoung was still working at the bar, he got a call from the manager telling that he was seeing a customer through the window of the bar and that Junyoung should go up and inform the customer that the bar was already closed for the day. But when Junyoung went to check, there was nobody in the bar. He thought the manager was pranking him and called him back to tell him to stop the joke. But the manager, after a long, awkward silence, said,
"Never mind,"
and hung up abruptly. The following day, Junyoung asked him what it was all about the previous night. The manager clearly didn't want to talk about it, but after pushing him a while, he finally opened his mouth. After the bar was closed, he had a drink with his friend who ran a restaurant across the street. On the way out, he looked up the bar and saw a woman looking down through the floor-length window. And so he called Chunyoung. When Chunyoung went up to the bar, manager was still looking up from the street and saw Chunyoung just pass through the woman standing there. Manager then told Chunyoung not to spread a word about it, as such a rumor would damage the business. And just few days after the incident, I myself saw the guy in the bar. Would you be still working here if you were me? Said Chunyoung, concluding his story. Right next day, some of female staffs gave notice already, and others were also clearly considering. I myself could not easily decide because my salary was the double of the normal staff due to my extra duties. That evening, I went up to the storage to prepare the opening of the bar. It was a particularly grey day, so I had to carry a torch. Probably because of all the stories I heard, I suddenly got curious about the wall covered with the plastic sheets on the way to the rooftop. I tore it open. The sheet must have been pretty old and got fairly brittle. After dust settled, I could see there were a picture frame with some scribbles, some old dress shirts, and a photo of a man and a woman taken against a field of flower hanging on the wall. I could not imagine what those were and why they were there. I just patched the opening up to hide what I did and moved up to the storage. As I was picking boxes and bottles for the day, I heard something bustling at one dark corner of the room. I flashed the light over, but could not see anything. But when I resumed my attention to the bottles, the noise came back. I flashed the light again, then saw a rat running down. Call me a coward, but I hate rats. I dropped everything and ran down to the manager. I insisted that I could not return to the storage until the rat was removed, and manager, after a scoff, assigned another male staff to get rid of the rat. So he and I headed to the rooftop. As we passed the plastic-covered wall, I mentioned what I found behind the sheet. Seeing him getting more bothered by the whole spooky situation than by the rat, I wanted to push him a bit, so flipped the sheet where I had opened earlier and showed him what were hanging there. He looked at them a while, and then without a word, turned the head back down to the bar, ignoring me asking what was wrong and what about the rats in the storage. He pulled the manager aside and said, I actually too saw a man in the bar. I didn't mention it to anyone because I didn't want to stir anything up. But there, on the wall to the rooftop, is a photo of a man, and I'm sure it's the same man I saw in the bar. I think there's something serious story behind it all. Before the rumor spread out of control, I think you should inform the owner about it. Next day, I was called up to come to work a couple of hours earlier than usual. When I arrived there were the owner, manager, a strange guy, and a couple of middle-aged ladies discussing something together. And from their talks, I could finally learn what had taken place there. The building of the cafe and bar was at first a residential flat before the area became more commercial. On the rooftop room lived a young couple. The wife was famous for her beauty and worked as a nightclub singer, while the husband seemed to be a day laborer. Unlikely couple, but overall they seemed to be deeply in love, apart from occasional noise of quarrel heard through the floor. And one day, such a quarrel seemed to go on longer than usual, and suddenly got quiet. So quiet into the following day. In the end, the neighbors went up to check on them and found both of them hung from the ceiling. The investigation concluded it a double suicide, and their room turned into storage when the building converted to commercial use. The owner didn't dare to get rid of their clothes and stuff left behind, so he simply covered them up with a plastic sheet. The two strange women were apparently shamans. They looked around the rooftop, the storage, and the rest of the building, and further explained that the both of them were still hanging around. The wife didn't seem to want to move on, and the husband was looking for the wife. The tragedy was, even though they both were there, they could not see each other. The shamans then went away, saying they needed to prepare something for the ritual. The owner called me and other staffs up to the roof. He gathered up the old clothes and pictures of the couple and burnt them while we offered a little prayer for the couple to peacefully move on. That seemed to do the trick. The rumor of seeing ghosts around ceased, and I worked there a few months more. I subsequently had to quit due to some issues at my school, but I still frequented the bar to see the old colleagues. Then one day, the new bartender told me a strange story. A few days prior, two middle-aged women came to the bar, looked around, and talked among themselves.
"What a disaster! What a disaster!"
"Indeed, trying to force the resentful souls to the heaven can't result any good."
Then they turned to the bartender and said,
"You work here, don't you? Please pass our word to the owner that it's too late and there's nothing we can do. The man has moved on, but the woman is still here. Her regrets for life now turn to resentments. Tell him to seek help before somebody gets hurt."
The new bartender asked me if I knew anything about what they talked about, what man and what woman. But I could not really tell her anything. And since then I visited the bar less and less. Now that's more than 10 years ago. And I still sometimes wonder if the same woman would be looking out from the floor-length window of the bar. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed today's story. Slightly shorter episode, but the story wasn't exactly straightforward, so I thought it should be enough for a single episode. And not entirely because I still felt a bit lazy after a few days of trip around last week. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a like and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel towards the first hurdle of 1,000 subscribers. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. Thank you. Where I am is getting grayer and colder. Hope you are all keeping well. Until next Sunday, stay safe and take care.